The highest levels of American politics are folding in real time, and the trigger for this catastrophic collapse wasn't the government shutdown, a judicial crisis, or a foreign war. It was the sudden, inexplicable rise of a single obscure mayoral candidate in New York City, Zoran Mamdani. Mamdani, a young state legislator running on an aggressive socialist platform, has become the epicenter of a seismic political shift that has left the Democratic establishment scrambling in genuine existential panic. Because if Mamdani wins, it won't just reshape America's largest city, it will redefine what the Democratic Party even is. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, the master of political survival, who has seen every play in the Washington playbook, just blinked. His collapse, a bizarre surrender on the Senate floor, is not a sign of weakness in a budget fight. It's a symptom of his overwhelming fear that the Mamdani machine is coming for him next. And President Trump? He sees the chaos, he recognizes the panic, and he has already made his move. A single, shocking statement that turned the entire New York City race on its head. The question now is not merely who wins in New York, but who is truly controlling America's future behind the curtain. Stick with me, because once you see how all the pieces fit together, you'll realize Schumer didn't just fold, he walked straight into the opposition's most sophisticated trap. Let me take you inside the two simultaneous crises that have brought the Democratic leadership to its knees. The Washington crisis. The leadership paradox. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, is caught in an impossible political bind. On one side, he is being crushed by the weight of the traditional Democratic establishment, the major donors, the moderate governors, and the old guard, all whispering that the party is careening too far left, losing its grip on the working-class voters who decide elections in swing states. On the other side stands a vocal, energized, and increasingly powerful progressive wing that views any policy compromise as a fundamental act of betrayal and any hint of moderation as strategic weakness. They demand purity, resistance, and a willingness to fight even if the fight makes no strategic or economic sense. This dynamic isn't just generating political disagreement, it is an existential crisis for party leadership. The pressure on Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is immense and personal. They are watching poll numbers collapse in critical swing districts. They are hearing from vulnerable incumbent senators who report that their once reliable constituents feel profoundly alienated by rhetoric that sounds more like cultural revolution than practical, tangible reform. They are seeing the electoral damage that comes from fielding candidates who are more interested in ideological purity tests than sound, practical governance. And in the middle of this boiling tension, Schumer's desperation became clear. His strategy during the government shutdown we've just endured, a shutdown that lasted well over 30 days, was not about budget negotiations or healthcare subsidies, despite the endless media repetition of that narrative. It was about raw political survival. It was Schumer and Jeffries desperately trying to prove to their radical base that they are willing to fight, willing to resist, and willing to draw an uncompromising line in the sand, even if that line makes no strategic sense, and, critically, even if it hurts the very federal workers and vulnerable families they claim to champion. The alternative, being seen as weak, as moderate, as too willing to work with the other side, terrifies them more than the shutdown itself. These are political veterans who understand power dynamics intimately, yet they are making national decisions based not on what is best for the country or sound policy, but based on a raw, debilitating political survival instinct. This is not leadership. It is a profound display of desperation dressed up in a suit. And that fear, the fear of being replaced by the radical left, didn't originate in Washington, D.C. It began, of all places, in the race for mayor of New York City, the New York crisis, the manufactured grassroots. Zoran Mamdani was a relatively obscure state assemblyman whose name meant nothing outside of his Brooklyn district. Yet, in the race to become the next mayor of America's largest and most politically significant city, he suddenly surged to become the indisputable frontrunner, leading in multiple polls and generating an enormous, visible wave of enthusiasm among young progressives. He presented himself as the authentic voice of the next chapter of Democratic politics. A young socialist reformer, barely in his 30s, championing causes like government-run grocery stores, massive tax increases on the wealthy, sweeping rent control expansions, and radical social programs. His campaign narrative was perfect, an inspiring, organic grassroots movement built on the backs of tens of thousands of dedicated volunteers, hundreds of thousands of doors knocked, and a movement that genuinely seemed to emerge spontaneously from the streets of New York. Except increasingly, the evidence suggests that it didn't. What looked like a spontaneous grassroots revolution is now being exposed by investigative journalists as something else entirely, a highly organized, sophisticated, and potentially illegal shell game designed to manufacture authenticity and momentum. Multiple reports have surfaced alleging that a staggering amount of money, well over $40 million, was funneled through a complex network of supposedly independent tax-exempt organizations. These organizations, which claim to be purely grassroots, all trace back through overlapping executive boards, shared office spaces, and perfectly coordinated messaging to the exact same high-level funding sources. We are talking about sophisticated money laundering techniques that resemble the mechanisms used in corporate fraud cases, not legitimate political campaigns. These organizations were allegedly created to give the appearance of widespread, independent support, when in reality, they were a single, coordinated funding pipeline for the Mamdani candidacy. The most damning evidence involves internal memos and communications obtained by reporters. These documents allegedly show executives from these independent organizations openly coordinating on strategy, timing their ad buys, and unifying their messaging directly with the Mamdani campaign, an activity that is strictly prohibited under federal tax law for groups claiming tax-exempt status. The legal purpose of these groups is to be genuinely independent. The operational reality, according to these reports, was a carefully constructed shell game. And the illusion of grassroots momentum runs even deeper. Those tens of thousands of dedicated volunteers knocking on doors? Reports suggest that over 1,000 of them weren't organic volunteers at all. They were, in fact, paid operatives funded through this exact same coordinated network, deployed deliberately to create the appearance of overwhelming, authentic, citizen-driven energy. It is political theater on a massive, dishonest scale, paying people to pretend to be passionate citizens just to manufacture the narrative of a spontaneous movement. But there is one final, troubling layer that puts this crisis into the national arena. Remember those tax-exempt organizations and their vast infrastructure? Investigative disclosures reveal that some of the initial funding used to build the operational infrastructure of these groups, the computers, the offices, the administrative staff, came directly from government grants. We are talking about figures potentially well north of $50 million in taxpayer money being used indirectly to build the very network that is now trying to influence elections nationwide. It is the same playbook that has been seen in other political machines using public funds to build a private political infrastructure. When this information started breaking, the facade began to crack, and the terror in Washington became palpable. What once looked like an inspiring socialist movement suddenly resembled a well-funded, coordinated corporate operation wearing a populist costume. And here's what Schumer and Jeffries understand. Once the public sees through the illusion, once they realize they have been sold a political story that is fundamentally untrue, the backlash is swift, merciless, and indiscriminate. Trust, once broken, is the most difficult currency to rebuild in politics, and that loss of trust risks poisoning the entire well for the Democratic Party. This is why those investigations, initially niche political stories, became front-page national news. The Mamdani machine, built on an illusion, represents the biggest threat to the legitimacy of the Democratic establishment. What do you believe is the single most damaging revelation about the Mamdani campaign? The alleged illegal coordination, or the alleged use of paid operatives disguised as volunteers? Leave your comment below. The Mamdani campaign, initially heralded as the pure, organic voice of the people, is now unraveling under the weight of an unprecedented campaign finance scandal. The revelations coming out of New York are not just local news, they are a national five-alarm fire for the Democratic establishment, ripping the veil off the sophisticated, potentially illegal tactics being used to propel the radical left into power. The story has moved from political speculation to criminal inquiry. The core of the scandal involves the alleged funneling of massive amounts of cash, some reports indicating well over $40 million, through a complex web of organizations designed to hide the true source and coordination of the funding. What was presented as an inspiring, grassroots uprising is now exposed as a masterfully constructed, highly coordinated political shell game, the three pillars of the scandal. The investigation centers on three explosive allegations that have shattered the campaign's populist narrative and terrified Washington leadership. One, alleged illegal coordination and dark money. The primary shockwave stems from the alleged coordination between the official Mamdani campaign and a network of supposedly independent, tax-exempt groups, the Shell Game. These organizations were intended to operate outside the campaign's direct control, allowing them to raise and spend money without the same strict limits. However, leaked internal documents and reporting suggest a sustained, systematic pattern of coordination, sharing strategies, aligning messaging, and timing expenditures perfectly, which is a direct violation of federal tax law. This level of alleged coordination transforms independent expenditure groups into a coordinated financial apparatus, essentially laundering political cash to bypass legal limits and obscure the true power players behind the movement. The foreign cash threat. Adding a critical layer of alarm, official complaints have been filed, including criminal referrals to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and the Department of Justice, alleging that the Mamdani campaign accepted illegal contributions from foreign nationals. While the campaign has claimed some donors may be U.S. citizens living abroad, the sheer volume of questionable donations, totaling nearly $13,000 from at least 170 donors with foreign addresses, triggered a national security-level concern. The acceptance of foreign money, a clear violation of election law, provides the opposition with a powerful, easily weaponized narrative of illegitimacy, second manufacturing authenticity. The paid volunteers. The second devastating revelation attacks the very soul of the Mamdani movement, the claim of authentic grassroots power. The illusion of grassroots. Mamdani's rise was built on the narrative of thousands of passionate, unpaid volunteers knocking doors and fueling a spontaneous movement. However, investigative reports allege that over 1,000 of these individuals were not volunteers, but paid operatives funded by the same coordinated network of shell organizations, the political lie. This is not a simple campaign error, it is a calculated effort to manufacture authenticity. The establishment realizes that if the public believes the most inspiring, organic movement in a generation was, in fact, an expensive, coordinated performance, the resulting cynicism will infect the entire political landscape. It means the people were sold a beautiful lie, and the messenger who preaches people power is actually a product of dark money and calculated deception. Third, taxpayer-funded infrastructure. Perhaps the most alarming and politically toxic revelation for the Democratic establishment is the alleged role of taxpayer funds. The government grant subsidy, buried in the financial disclosures, are indications that initial government grants, potentially totaling tens of millions of dollars, were used to subsidize the basic infrastructure, office space, administrative staff, computers, of the same network of organizations that now stands accused of coordinating illegal political activity, the ultimate betrayal. This revelation allows the opposition to construct a devastatingly simple argument. Your tax dollars were used to build the political machine that is now trying to undermine the system and enact radical, financially ruinous policy. For moderate Democrats struggling to defend their fiscal responsibility, this is an impossible talking point to counter the Washington reaction, silence and terror. The response from the Democratic leadership confirms their paralyzing fear. Schumer's silent retreat. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, a New Yorker and the most powerful Democrat in Washington, has maintained a deafening silence on the Mamdani controversy. He pointedly refused to endorse Mamdani even after the primary victory, an unprecedented snub that highlights the existential threat the socialist movement poses to his centrist control. When pressed by reporters, Schumer has literally ignored the question, a clear signal that he is afraid of either alienating his progressive base by attacking Mamdani or alienating his moderate colleagues and donors by endorsing a campaign built on alleged illegality. The establishment's alarm. The silence of Schumer is a tactical choice born of terror. He and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who publicly declared that Mamdani is not the future of the Democratic Party, understand that the Mamdani model, if successful, will be replicated nationwide. It is a formula that promises to primary and replace every centrist Democrat with a hard-left ideologue, spelling the end of their control over the party apparatus. The Mamdani scandal has revealed a clear and present danger to the Democratic establishment. It is not just about a candidate, it is about the system of political power being exploited and weaponized to manufacture a new, radical reality. The moderate wing is staring down the barrel of a movement that is financially sophisticated, ideologically uncompromising, and potentially illegitimate. A movement that promises to replace them entirely. Do you think the criminal referrals filed against the Mamdani campaign will lead to a full federal investigation, or will political pressure prevent the DOJ from pursuing the case before the election? Leave your comment below. The investigation into Zohran Mamdani's meteoric rise has escalated from a campaign finance inquiry to a full-blown political crisis, exposing not just the alleged corruption of a single mayoral campaign, but the blueprint for how the radical left plans to seize control of the entire Democratic Party apparatus nationwide. As the allegations of illegal foreign funding, coordinated dark money, and taxpayer-subsidized political infrastructure continue to swirl, the national Democratic establishment, led by Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, has been paralyzed. They are trapped between the fear of attacking their own base and the certainty that the Mamdani model will be used to primary them out of existence. The grand strategy, the new political machine. What the investigative reports on Mamdani's funding and operations have truly uncovered is the new political machine, a sophisticated operational model designed to circumvent campaign finance laws and manufacture political reality. This machine is far more dangerous to the old guard than any ideological platform because it weaponizes the very system the establishment created. The core mechanisms of the new political machine are now chillingly clear. Manufacturing authenticity, the use of paid operatives disguised as grassroots volunteers, is the ultimate political deception. It allows the movement to claim a moral and popular mandate while secretly being bankrolled by massive, coordinated financial streams. This model discredits the notion of genuine people power and replaces it with an engineered appearance of mass mobilization. The dark money funnel, the use of interlocking tax-exempt organizations, is not just about moving money, it's about masking coordination. By allegedly violating federal laws that prohibit direct cooperation between independent expenditure groups and campaigns, the Mamdani machine created a financial hydra that could pour unlimited resources into the race while hiding the true architects and their corporate-level spending taxpayer subsidy. The alleged initial use of government grants to build the foundational infrastructure of these independent organizations is the toxic masterstroke. It means the movement used public funds to build the framework of a private political machine, allowing them to scale quickly and cheaply. This is the definition of political exploitation, turning the very system that is supposed to serve the public into a private campaign subsidy. For Schumer and Jeffries, this is not just an election, it is a preview of their own political doom. They know this machine will soon be turned on them. The message is clear: you are either with the movement or you will be primaried by it. Their refusal to endorse Mamdani, even after his primary victory, is an act of terrified tactical retreat, an attempt to signal to their donor class and moderate colleagues that they are not yet fully in the grip of the radicals. Trump's masterful counterstrike, exposing the fraud. While the Democratic establishment remains frozen, paralyzed by their own internal contradictions, President Trump executed a masterful, strategic counterstrike that instantly flipped the entire narrative. Trump's move was simple, shocking, and profoundly destabilizing to the Mamdani machine's narrative of purity. He didn't attack Mamdani's socialist platform. He attacked his authenticity. In a single, blunt statement, Trump declared, "Mamdani is a fraud. He talks about the working class, but he's funded by the same globalist dark money that funds the swamp. Don't believe the lie." This statement, immediately amplified across all opposition media, was a stroke of strategic genius. It validated the investigation. By publicly seizing on the allegations of foreign funding and coordination, Trump elevated the finance scandal from a niche election law question to a national corruption of democracy story. It destroyed the narrative. Mamdani's entire political brand is built on being the anti-establishment outsider, the voice of the true, uncorrupted grassroots. Trump's comment positioned him as the ultimate insider, a tool of globalist dark money operating a manufactured political apparatus. Trump turned the socialist purity argument on its head. The candidate who hates the establishment is secretly the most established fake campaign of all. It cornered Schumer. Trump's intervention put Schumer in an even more impossible position. If Schumer attacks Mamdani, he's endorsing Trump's view of the scandal. If he defends Mamdani, he's defending a potentially illegal political machine that is threatening to destroy his own caucus. He remains trapped in a defensive silence, the final political domino, the collapse of democratic trust. The deepest consequence of the Mamdani scandal is the irreparable damage to the Democratic Party's most essential political currency. Trust. The entire left-wing political movement, from Bernie Sanders to the young activists who power the campaigns, is built on the moral claim that they represent the honest, uncorrupted voice of the people fighting corporate money and the establishment. If Zohran Mamdani is proved to be a product of massive, coordinated, and potentially illegal shell funding, the consequences will be devastating. Mass cynicism. Millions of young voters and dedicated activists who believed in the authenticity of the movement will become deeply cynical, realizing their passion was exploited to fuel a manufactured power grab. This cynicism will translate into depressed turnout and internal demoralization across the entire Democratic base, a weapon for the opposition. The opposition now has a perfect, repeatable narrative. The entire progressive movement is a lie. Every future socialist or progressive candidate will be instantly labeled a Mamdani fraud, their grassroots credentials permanently tainted by the New York scandal. The end of the old guard, Schumer and Jeffries, paralyzed by fear and lacking a clear moral authority, are incapable of either fighting the new machine or defending the old one. Their failure to act decisively confirms their status as a dying beast, incapable of adapting to the brutal, sophisticated tactics now defining the new political landscape. The New York City mayoral race has become the battleground where the future of the Democratic Party is being decided. It is a confrontation between an old, fearful establishment and a new, ruthlessly effective machine, a machine that, thanks to Trump's intervention, is now exposed for the fraud it may truly be. The political dominoes are still falling, and the greatest collapse is yet to come. Do you think Zohran Mamdani can survive the criminal referrals and allegations of foreign funding while maintaining his claim to be the authentic voice of the working class? Leave a comment below. The Zohran Mamdani scandal is now the political chessboard has been completely upended. Zohran Mamdani's rise, fueled by a campaign apparatus now accused of illegal foreign funding, coordinated dark money, and taxpayer-subsidized infrastructure, has achieved what years of congressional gridlock could not. It has paralyzed the Democratic Party and forced Chuck Schumer into an act of political desperation. Schumer's decision to effectively surrender on the Senate floor during the shutdown, abandoning the crucial demand for ACA tax credit extensions, was the clearest possible sign that the Mamdani threat has superseded all other political priorities. He didn't yield to the opposition. He yielded to the internal terror that the progressive wing, validated by the Mamdani model, would target him and his moderate allies. Next, the two-front war and Schumer's capitulation. Schumer is now fighting a two-front war he cannot win without destroying his own party. The internal civil war, the progressive wing, powered by the Mamdani playbook, is unforgiving. Their message is simple. Compromise is weakness, and compromise means you will be replaced. The moderate Democrats who broke ranks to end the shutdown are now under intense pressure from the left. But their decision has been vindicated by the National Democratic leadership's complete failure to secure any policy win from the crisis. Schumer's political authority is shattered. He is a general whose soldiers are openly defecting. The external firestorm, Trump's weapon, President Trump's intervention was a precision political strike by framing Mamdani as a fraud funded by globalist dark money. He did two things. He nationalized the scandal. He turned an election law controversy into a core national debate about political legitimacy, making Mamdani a liability for every Democrat in a swing district. He destroyed the purity narrative. He stripped the progressive movement of its most sacred claim, its grassroots authenticity. When the opposition successfully paints the most vocal socialist leader as a creature of sophisticated, hidden corporate funding, the entire progressive moral mandate collapses. Schumer, unable to attack Mamdani without alienating the powerful progressive base, and unable to defend him without endorsing a potentially illegal financial apparatus, retreated into an agonizing silence. This silence, punctuated by his surrender on the shutdown, is the sound of a leader whose strategic options have been completely exhausted. The long-term damage. The end of democratic unity. The Mamdani scandal has inflicted irreversible damage on the political credibility of the Democratic Party, the consequences of which will be felt in every election for the next decade. The loss of moral high ground. The Democrats' central argument has always been their moral superiority over the opposition, their claim to represent the common person against corporate interests and corruption. The Mamdani revelations, allegations of $13,000 in illegal foreign funding, coordination with dark money groups, and the use of taxpayer funds to build political machinery have rendered this argument politically inert. The opposition can now simply point to Mamdani and say, they are the true hypocrites. The man who rails against money is funded by the greatest political shell game in the country. The blueprint for primaries. The most terrifying legacy of Mamdani is his winning model. The new political machine, with its manufactured grassroots and sophisticated dark money funnel, is now the proven way to primary and defeat incumbent moderate Democrats. Every centrist in a battleground district knows that they are now one coordinated dark money campaign away from losing their seat to a hard-left ideologue who demands ideological purity. This will force an accelerated leftward drift in the entire party, making it even more unpalatable to swing voters. The triumph of institutional paralysis. Schumer's failure to defeat Mamdani and his subsequent failure to secure any policy win in the shutdown is accelerating the opposition's ultimate goal, the elimination of the legislative filibuster. The Mamdani scandal proves that the Democratic Party is too divided, too fearful, and too strategically inept to govern. This failure is the strongest justification the opposition needs to argue that the 60-vote threshold must be abolished to restore order. If the filibuster falls, the era of Democratic political relevance in Congress is effectively over. The New York mayoral race was never just about a city. It was the ultimate test case for the future of American politics. The result is a Democratic Party that is morally compromised, strategically paralyzed, and watching its most powerful leaders crumble under the pressure of a political machine they neither understand nor control. The political battlefield is now open, and the war for the soul of the Democratic Party is set to consume its leadership entirely. What do you predict will be the first major policy or institutional change the opposition pursues if the Democratic Party continues to be paralyzed by the Mamdani civil war? Leave a comment below. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.